Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of your favorite weekly interview show, Between Two Succulents, right here at Charm City Books. I'm your friendly neighborhood bookseller, Brandon Richard Butts, and I'm very excited to have yet another amazing guest here for you guys. Um, Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the more important things in life, i.e., our freedom of speech. So, let me introduce you to our guest for the day. He is the author of several books, honestly, like the bio is massive, including the best-selling The Rage of a Privileged Class, which is one that I read a long time ago that I haven't that I would love for you all to that I want to recommend to all of you. A former contributing editor to Newsweek magazine, his writing has appeared in the Chicago Sun-Times, Time Magazine, USA Today, the Washington Post, and the New York Daily News, and has appeared in a number of major TV outlets such as CNN and Good Morning America. I told you the resume is long. Everyone, please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Ellis Cose. It's truly across from you today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
It's a real pleasure to be with you, Brandon. I'm delighted we were able to make the connection.
Yes, truly, truly. So, today we will be talking with Ellis about his latest nonfiction work that I would consider to be a nonfiction study of America, period. But the title of the book is "The Short Life and Curious Death of Free Speech in America," which is you may have seen Ellis speak in a number of the interviews in his extensive career, but today we're going to try our best to get to know him a little bit better in a segment that we like to call All Sucks. So, Ellis, this is kind of our namesake around here, and how it goes is I'm going to take it easy and pretty much introduce you to our succulent VIPs for this week, and
Okay.
You're going to tell me which one you would pick to sit beside you on the lectern while you give a speech about speech. Whichever one you like the most. Does that sound enough?
That sounds fair enough.
Cool. All right, so let's go for it. So first up, we have one of our favorites around here, the fairies washboard. It's a charming succulent plant native to Africa. It features a rosette of triangular leaves with distinct ridges. The distinct ridges are the texture of a washboard, giving it its name. The leaves create a spiral effect that is quite dizzying when looking at the plant from above. The plant produces flower clusters in the summer, but the flowers are not showy. It's going to be our first one. And then our honorable mention for today is going to be this lovely cactus plant here. Cactus, of course, like a lot of heat and prefer the drier climate, prefer to be watered not too much, and they are not the strongest when it comes to intense water, so be careful, definitely, and they do die off sometimes in the winter often. But this is a great little plant that you can have in your home, especially when it's bud little flowers around the top there. So, Ellis, which one would you choose?
Oh, I think I have to go with the succulent bush that has both flowers and thorns. That's what life gives to you. So I'm gonna go with the first.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Yeah, and we can't do anything about that sweet and sharp nature of life. I love it though, so we can only embrace it. Alrighty, thanks for playing along with us in our little game. Now we're gonna go ahead and get into your book.
Okay.
You have, again, as I've said, your career spans several journalism and authorship and several other outlets. So you very clearly know what you're talking about, but at the same time, there are so many topics that you've been able to cover in your career. So my question to you first is, why this book and why?
Well, I think one thing that's very clear is that we're in a moment where we are rethinking our democracy. We are rethinking our basic assumptions about how well it works and whether it works. And one of the most important facets of that democracy is speech, our ability to speak in a united voice, but also our ability to speak as individuals, our ability to have our voices heard, whatever strata of life we are from. And it seems to me that that's really, when I talk about the death, I don't mean it in a literal sense, but I think that's really endangered, right? Because of all the corporate money that goes into politics, because of other factors. The voices of ordinary people are very often just not heard anymore. And then in addition to that, we have an idea of speech in this country. And the idea of speech is that it is through speech that we get to our better selves. It is through speech that better ideas vanquish bad ideas. And I think what we're finding now is that doesn't necessarily work, because speech consists of so much mistruth, so much deception, and so much negativity. And you put all of that together, and it makes it difficult for good speech to triumph over bad. So I think for all those reasons, this is a moment for us to think about democracy. It's a moment to think about speech in a different way than we've thought about it before.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it helps us determine what is good and what is bad, period. But then, like, it's specifically in terms of speech, as we take more as this generation takes more of the helm behind making effective change. That's, I feel like, has been a big part
Sure.
of that lesson. But yeah, no. And so one point that you talk about that I found interesting, because I have a more artistic background than a science-based one. So when you highlight the silencing of science, or how science has been not even looked, but pushed aside in spite of all of its findings, that has happened specifically on a gargantuan level during the Trump administration. So I'm wondering, could you highlight something that you found most interesting during your research process?
Sure. I mean, in general, I mean, what we have found is that virtually nothing that Trump says is true. And that's unusual. I mean, we are accustomed to having politicians lie. We are not accustomed to having politicians continually and irrepressibly lie, and particularly about facts that have been well established. There was a study that I talk about in the book that was done by Columbia University, and it noted that it was done in 2020, and it noted that under Trump, some 400 scientific studies that have been funded or supported in some way by the government have been repressed under his administration, because they didn't want to hear about scientific truth. They particularly didn't want to hear about the truths of climate science and how our planet is changing as a result of the things that mankind has done, because they draw oxygen from their myths that the old way of doing things, that old energy sources, etc., are better and will save us. And that's only one example, but it's an example from science and what happens when you distort reality, which is also a way of distorting science.
Yeah. Thank you for that. All right, I'm not gonna sit here and think, because I can do that all day. But yes, great. No, I love. I'm the nonfiction guy around here at the bookstore, and then
Right.
anything that has an opportunity for us to kind of debunk or dive into the Constitution specifically, I'm kind of all about it. So I really did enjoy this book. And again, I'm still thinking about it, because you truly created a book that shows the true definition of free speech as well as its issues. So I think that you're going to be the perfect person for our next section that we like to call the lightning round. And so how this is going to work is I'm going to ask you 3 questions regarding your book. And all of you out there watching on our StreamYard, this is the time for you to be able to chime in, comment, and you can give it to all of those questions like that way in some capacity. And if you qualify to win the prize of all prizes, you could win a free copy of Short Life and Curious Death of Free Speech by Mr. Elliot Cose, our guest today. So Ellis, are you ready to play today?
I think I am.
Yes, awesome. So let's go for it. Question number 1. Can you tell us a time where you had a hard time exercising your personal right to free speech?
Well, I think first of all, and yes, the answer is yes, but I think first of all, we need to draw a distinction between the right to speech and the privilege to speak. When we talk about the right to speak, that's a constitutional right. It's in the First Amendment, and it comes from the right to speak whatever the government wants you to say. In other words, it's a injunction against the government preventing you from exercising your ability to speak. When we talk about the privilege to speak, we talk about the privilege to be heard on various platforms. I had the privilege for many years of being a columnist, for instance, for Newsweek magazine. I did not have a right to say whatever I wanted to in News magazine. They offered me that as a privilege. And we want to talk about a time when I felt that that privilege was infringed upon. I guess we can go back to the Iran War in 2003, when it became very clear to me that a voice that was a critic of that war as we geared up to go into that war was not welcome at the magazine, and that it was very unlikely that if anything that I wrote, which was very critical of the United States considering going into that war, would actually appear in the magazine. So I see that as a time when my privilege to speak was threatened, not so much my right, which I said is a very specific thing going back to its governmental meaning.
No, that's a very clear and specific distinction. Yeah, definitely a big difference for sure. All right, great. Question number 2. How would you briefly describe the influence of money on democracy?
I would describe it as huge and bad. What has happened in modern times is that the route to electoral victory has a lot to do with access to media. And access to media has a lot to do with money. And so if you have a lot of money and you basically control speech in terms of political speech in this country. You add to that the fact that political candidates, particularly at the national level, but also the local level, spend a heck of a lot of time and energy trying to please the people who fund their campaigns or who fund them. And as a result, if you are a rich person supporting a candidate, even if you don't live in that person's district, you have a lot more influence than a poor person who lives in that district. So money corrupts the very idea of representation, because the representation that we are supposed to have via the Constitution is representation as individuals and as Americans, not as rich people and not as big corporations.
Yeah, excellent. Well put. Wow. Okay, last and final question. What would you say to a community that feels as though they've been silenced?
Well, I think their sentiment is probably correct. If by silence they mean that they have been outshouted by louder voices, if it means that they are not heard because moneyed interests are taking up that space that should belong to them, I think they're probably right. But I do not think they are probably right if they're saying that their ability to speak truth to power has been denied, because that ability still exists. That ability to speak out against wrongdoing, to speak out for your rights still exists. It's just restricted in ways that it shouldn't be restricted.
Yeah, great. And with that, everyone, that is Elliot Cose, our lightning round champion. Thank you so much for playing along. And thank you all for playing along at home. Our winner today is going to be a first-time winner, Miss Sally Wegman. Thank you so much for winning and tuning in and playing along with us. You can pick up your free copy right down here at Charm City Books. Or if you're out of town or anything like that, we can arrange delivery or in-town delivery or an out-of-town shipping, whatever. And that's going to be another episode of our show today. Ellis, before we let you go, just wanted to know what's next for you. Are we taking a break, grabbing wine, maybe a vacation, or are we already starting on the next project?
That sounds great. But I'll be coming out with a book this summer called Race and Reckoning. From founding fathers to today's disruptors, and it's a brief history of race and American thought.
I love that, disruptors. I love that. So the work never stops, folks. Clearly, it never stops. We love to show shout out causes and organizations around here. So do you want to take this moment to shout out a cause that you support or an organization you'd like to?
Sure, if I can use it in a very sort of self-interested way, I've started up a project called Renewing American Democracy, which we will be officially announcing in a few weeks, and it's an attempt to harness the voices of young people across the country and harness the voices of others that are not necessarily often heard. Where we'll be doing a listening tour, we'll be doing talks at various universities, we'll be having conferences, all about this idea of how this democracy can be improved and of what's wrong with it and how people who don't generally have access to it gain access. So you'll be hearing about it.
Yes, I'm excited to hear about it. Thank you, everyone. Elliot, Ellis Cose did all of the hard work in writing this book for you, but there is more and more of work for you. So I highly suggest that you grab yourself a copy of The Short Life and Curious Death of Free Speech by Ellis Cose. Thank you so much for joining us again today, Ellis. We appreciate you so much.
It's been a great pleasure, pleasure, Brandon.
Thank you all. Great pleasure. Thank you. And thank you all for braving the wilds of social media to be with here yet again on another great Tuesday evening for Between Two Succulents. Please stay hydrated, even though it is getting cooler. This is what my grandmother would call the pneumonia season. So make sure that you wear layers and stay healthy, stay masked up, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care. Thank you. Okay.